Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be looking into Express.js. Express.js is a minimalist web framework that gives all the tools and features we need to create our own APIs. It's used from the smallest of side projects. I have my own project that uses Express, all the way up to production grade APIs. It's really fast, really easy to learn, so it's a great place to start creating your own APIs. I just want to apologise before we get started for any audio issues. There's a little bit of crackling on the mic. I think it gets better throughout. And also, like, my voice sort of goes higher and lower sometimes. So sorry about that. It's my first tutorial, so I'm still learning audio recording and how to edit and stuff like that. I think I say it at the end of the video, but there's going to be a link to the GitHub code, so you can have a look at that, clone it, build upon it yourself, and just look through it if you find that easier, as well as just watching the video. But without further ado, let's get into it. So to start off, all I have is an empty folder. We're going to create our own project using make directory. We'll just call it Express app. Make that. So we'll cd into Express app. And we just need to create an npm project. So we can do that by doing npm init-y. So that's created an empty project with all the default settings. So now we just need to install Express, which is very easy. We just do npm I express, so that'll download and install the package for us. Okay, so now I'm just going to open that up in Visual Studio Code. You can open it up in whatever editor you want to use. So the first thing we're going to do is just add a script so that when we can run this script and that will run the Express app for us. So we're just going to call it dev. And what it's going to do is create an environment variable called node-env and set that to development. So this will just run Node in development version, which is good for us because it'll give us errors. And then we're just going to node index.js. Okay. First thing we're going to do is create index.js. And in here, we're going to set up our Express project. So create a constant called Express and set that equal to require Express. So we're just pulling in Express now. Then we're going to initialize it. So we'll just set that to app, const app equals Express, and then call it similar to how you would call a function. Const port equals, and then you can set this to whatever you like, but I'm just going to go with 3000, which is quite a standard number for Express applications. Now we need to do app.listen. So this will start up Express and make it listen on the port that we've specified. And we can also pass in a function here, which is useful. This will essentially just print out into the console, or really it'll do whatever you like, but we're just going to console log. And then using backticks, I think they're called, you can do app running at http/localhost, and then $ curly brackets, and you can pass in port. Oh, I wish I could spell. There you go. You don't really need to put semicolons, but I just get so used to it, I put semicolons all the time. So that is essentially our starting point for an Express app. We just need to start it up using app.listen. So easy enough. Now we're just going to create our first route, just to give you a demonstration of how to do that. So we're going to do app. And then we can call a HTTP method. In our case, we just want to use get. The first parameter is the route name. It's just going to be / in our case. The next parameter is the function that it's going to call when we go to this route. And that accepts 3 arguments, but in this case, we're just going to use 2. The other argument is next, but we're not going to be using that yet, but we'll get into what that's used for a little bit later. So we're just going to return something here. So we can use res, which is respond.send, and we can send something back. I'm just going to do the classic hello world. So that is our first root. So we can call this by going to, you can go to your URL like this. Localhost 3000. We actually need to start it first. That would be good. So npm run dev to start it up. App running at localhost. And we can actually just control click this. Oh. Opened up in Chrome, so never mind, we'll just do it here. There we go. So it returns hello world. So that's our first request. I'm actually going to do it here as well. So this is Insomnia. You might be more familiar with Postman. It's just a client to send requests to APIs. So we'll just do it again here, localhost 3000, and then we'll send that. So there we go. So I'm going to be using Insomnia from now on, just to send requests, just because it's a bit easier. And we're going to be doing some post requests later as well to create users. So we're going to want to use the JSON body, so we can actually pass through data to the API. Okay, so now that we have an idea of how to create a root, let's look at a more complex example where we're going to create a user system where we can essentially create a user, retrieve users, and list the user's information. So the first thing we're going to do is create a users.js file. We're going to require express again. Express equal to require express. Now we're going to create another const called router this time. And that's going to be equal to express.router with a capital R. So what this router is going to allow us to do is essentially create another router which is separate from this main one here. So this is our main router. And then what we're going to do is include it into the main router, sort of merge them together. And this just helps us create a much more modular system, so we can separate routes around the code base and then sort of bring them all together, which is it's much simpler than just having it all in one massive routes file. So the first thing we're going to do is just create our first route. So router.get, and we're just going to do slash again. You might think that slash has already been taken, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's just return, we're going to return users. What we're going to do is just sort of define our own little users array and return that. So if we do res.json, so this is how we return JSON from the API. We're just going to call it users. We haven't created users yet, but we'll do that now. Let's do let users equal to, and it's just going to be an array of objects. So we're going to have a name, which is going to be JSON, named after me. Password. I'm just going to go with 1234, not the most secure password, but it'll do for now. And we'll create another one. Name, we'll go with Bob, that'll do. And password, in our case we want the password to be unique because we're going to be using it for authentication later, but we'll get to that soon. So we're going to return this users array as JSON. But first what we need to do is do module.exports equals router. So we're just going to export the router itself. We don't really need to do anything else besides export this router because it'll sort of store everything we need. And then what we're going to do is import it here. So we'll do const users equals require / and then users. And what we can do here is do app.use. So essentially what it creates is middleware. So this use function is how we would normally include middleware, and we'll get to middleware a little bit later on. But we'll do use and /users. So the first parameter here is the handler. So this will be the URL that we go to, and then pass in users. So the reason why we could use / here and not have it conflicting with this / is because it's going to be, this is the base URL, so it's actually just, this is actually just /users. So we'll do an example now. If we go back to Insomnia and do /users, we'll need to restart our Express app first. Send that, and then you can see that we got our array of users, which is good. So that's working. The next thing we'll do is add our middleware. So when we're going to do an authenticated middleware, it's similar to what you would use in production, but obviously much less secure. So I would say if you are going to add authentication, to look into that later. I do plan on doing a tutorial on that at some point. So we'll do const authenticated equals, and for middleware, it's basically the same as this, the normal root handlers, except we're going to pass in a third parameter. So we can do res just like we did here, but then we pass in next. So we'll get to what next does in a second. So let's create a function. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the password from the authorization header. So rec.headers. So this rec object stores all of everything you would get in the request. So the body, the headers, pretty much everything you would expect. Headers.authorization. This could really be anything, but usually it'll be passed through in the authorization headers. Usually you'll get some kind of a token, which you can use to authenticate the users. In our case, we're going to be passing through the password and then matching it with the users here. Not a very good system, but it'll work for what we're doing here. So const user equals, I'm going to do users.find, and then we're going to do e.password is equal to the password that we've passed in, which is just here. So that should get us a user, but we need to handle the scenario where we don't get a user. So in that case, we need to throw an error. So what I'm going to do is check whether we get a user. So if there's no user, we're going to return next new error, no user found. So depending on the style of code you're writing, synchronous code doesn't really need to use next in this case. You can just throw a new error, but we're gonna do that a little bit later on, but for now I'm just gonna give you an example of how to do error handling with next. So we'll do return, and then we'll just wrap this in next again. And basically when you call next, it goes on to the next middleware, but if you pass in a parameter into next, it'll go to the error handling middleware. Express can do this by default, but you can create your own custom error handling. We won't cover this in this video, but I can do another video on that if you want me to. But Express will just handle this itself, which is okay. So that's if a user isn't found, but if one is found, what we're going to do is add rec.user equals user. So what this will do is anything that uses this authenticated middleware will get assigned rec.user. So for example, if this used the middleware, we could do rec.user, and we would get the user that's authenticated. That's useful so we can access the user very easily later on. And now we're just going to call next. So if it doesn't have any arguments passed into it, it'll just go to the next handler, which could be another middleware, but it also could be a handler like this, which is just the actual root handler. So we're going to create a new root. We're going to use get again, and we're just going to do /me. Let me just do a single quotes to keep consistent. I'm going to use this authenticated middleware, and then we're going to pass in another handler, rec.res, and we're just going to return res.json. We're going to return user, and that's going to be equal to rec.user. So we can see we're using this rec.user, which we defined up here. So when it comes to middleware, you can really pass in as much as you want. You can basically do, so if we had authenticated, we could have another one, test. We could have a ton of middleware, and you can even do it in line as well, where you do something like this, rec, res, next, and basically create another function that calls next here. I would usually, just for the sake of like readability, I would usually just define them and then just call them like this, as opposed to actually doing it inline, because it can get a bit messy. But for now, we'll just stick with our authenticated middleware, and we should, if we go to the URL and we do have to restart, I would recommend using something like NodeMon or restart your server anytime you make a change, but this will do for now. So we go to /users/me, we should, yep, there we go, we get our user return. Jason from the future here. Whilst editing the video, I realised I didn't really go into how to create the authorization header. If you're using Insomnia, and I assume it'll be pretty similar in Postman, if you go over to the header section and just type in auth, it should actually autocomplete authorization, and then set it to whatever the password of the user you're trying to get is. So in my case, it was 1234. So that should work for you. Back to the video. Yep, there we go. We get our user return. So that is a very basic example of authentication. You would obviously use some different stuff. So you do logins and stuff like that. So you go to a login URL, check the password matches, and it's obviously going to be a hashed password, not just plain text. Check it matches, create some sort of a JavaScript web token, return that, and then use that in this authenticated function. But like I said, I can do this. This is a little bit more advanced. So I can do this in another tutorial in the future. Okay, so now we're going to look into actually creating a user, and for this we're going to use the post request. So similar to how we did the get request, we're going to do router dot, and instead of get we're going to do post, and as a path we're going to just do slash, and root handler. We're not going to use any middleware for this because there won't be a user, they won't be signed in obviously because they're creating their user. So in order for this to work properly, we need to add a couple of middlewares that can handle form submissions and also JSON data being sent to the API. So the first one is app.use express.json. And what this will do is it'll be able to pass JSON data that's sent to the API. Without this, it won't be able to pass JSON data. And the next one is app.use I required E there. Express dot URL encoded, and you have to pass in a parameter here, extended, and we'll just put it to true. There we go. So this one will allow for JSON data to be sent, and this will allow for form data to be sent. So now that we've done that, we can access rec.body, which will just be the JSON data or the form data that gets sent in. First thing we'll do actually is check that the right data actually got sent through, so we'll do a little bit of validation, I suppose. So we'll do if rec.body.name or rec.body.password. If one of these doesn't exist, then we can't properly create a user. In which case, we're just going to throw an error, throw a new error, and then we'll do something like name or password missing. That should be enough for the user to know what they need to do. Now we'll do users.push, and I think in this case you could use the spread operator, but we're just going to do it like this. So we'll do name rec.body.name. It might be easy to assign rec.body to a variable or something, so you don't have to keep writing rec.body. But it'll do for now. Password rec.body.password, and that should push to the users array that we've got. And what we'll do is we will return send status 201. So this won't return any information besides the status. And off the top of my head, I think 201 is created, so it will just tell us that we've actually successfully created something from this request, which is good. So if we restart our Express app, and what we need to do now is actually pass in some JSON data. So we'll do name, we'll do John We'll do password, something unique. 9584, that'll do. And we need to post this to /users. So let's do that. 201 created, so we've created that user now, which is good. So now what we need is a way to retrieve a user's information. So we're going to add another route. I'm going to do router.get. And this will be a good time to show what parameters are, how parameters work, sorry. So we do slash, and then you can do colon name. So this colon name represents a parameter, and it's going to be a parameter called name in this case. So we'll do another handler, rec res. And all we're going to do here is return the user with that name. So const user equals users.find. Just going to do e.name, and we'll do to lowercase, just so that we don't have to pass in the specific case. And we can do rec dot, and the way we access parameters is using this params property, params dot, and then it's just the same name as you specified here. So in our case, name, and again dot to lowercase, just in case we pass in a capital letter or something like that, and it doesn't match. So we'll do another check. We'll do if there's no user found, we'll just throw new error, user not found. Otherwise, we'll return some JSON data, and in this case it's just the user. Okay, so we'll restart our Express app and have a look. So we need to go to, well, first we need to change this to get, and then we need to go to users/JSON. We should be able to get, there we go, we've got JSON, which is one of our users. We'll get rid of that. So that's pretty much the API stuff covered. A lot of it really is just these route handlers and middlewares like authenticated. Again, you can actually specify this in another file. Maybe you've got a middleware folder, and you can have authenticated middleware and just pass that in and then use it all over the application. You don't have to have it in this folder exactly. So you just basically do module.exports, and in this case you would just do authenticated. So you can do things like that just to make it easier. One last thing I want to show you is how to pass through static files. So basically, Express, as well as being able to pass through like JSON and any kind of data you want, it can also pass through HTML, which is really useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to install Pug, which is a templating engine. So we're going to do npm I pug. I'm going to go back to index.js, and there's something we need to do. We need to alter the settings just to add the Pug view engine. So we do app.set view, and we're going to set that to Pug. And the great thing is about Pug is it just works right off the bat. So you install Pug, you add this line, and you can use Pug. It uses the views folder, so we just create a views folder. You can change this, you can change the static paths, but views is usually what I would go for anyway, so it works out quite nicely. And we're just going to create a profile.pug, and then we're just going to create a quick Pug file. So if you never used Pug before, this is just an example. You can actually use a lot of other things as well, like handlebars, which is quite a nice one. But you can just follow along with this, even if you don't know Pug. So we'll do HTML head for the header tag, title. We're going to pass through, and this is sort of like quite a powerful feature. You could pass through variables into the template, and then when it displays it, it'll replace it with the variables that you pass through. So we'll put name's profile, and this will be the title of the page. We'll do body. We'll do a h1 tag, and we'll do name, and then we'll just set it to the name that we pass through. So that's the pug template done. If we go back to users.js and we add a new router.get, and this time what we'll do is we'll do a similar thing. So we'll do name / but then we'll do profile. And we'll do a route handler rec res. And basically we want to do this functionality again. So if we do, we can just copy this bit here. And the last thing, which is a bit different, is instead of using res.json or res.send, we're going to do res.render, which will take the template which we pass in here, which is going to be profile, which is the one that we just specified here. And we're going to pass in an object name rec dot. Not rec actually, it's user dot name. So yeah, this render function will take the name of the file that you actually want to render, and then you can specify the parameters you want to pass in, and it will automatically replace them with whatever you've passed in, and then return the HTML, which is very, very useful. So we'll run it again, npm run dev, and this time we'll just go to the browser. We'll do /users /json and then /profile, and there we go. It's returned the template that we wanted. So it's taken the pug template and then changed it into HTML, which is really useful. So personally, when I'm creating APIs, I don't usually do this. I usually have a single page application on the front end, so I don't use the static stuff, but it is quite useful for some things. I created like an OAuth2 server using, and it used static pug files. Actually, I think it's handlebars in that case, but it is quite useful if you just want to create a quite simple web app. So that's pretty much it. There's a few other things. Express has a ton of middleware that you can use for securing things, extra functionality, compressing as well, making the requests smaller, which is quite useful. But that should get you going. I'm going to upload this repository to GitHub so you can have a look at it, and maybe build off of it and structure things however you want to, but this should be a good starting point for you. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye.